Carl Jung explained how to be creative. Without forcing it, true creativity arises from the unconscious, not from striving. It does not respond to the clenched fist, the gritted teeth, or the anxious tapping of fingers on a desk. It moves through us when we are empty, when we are willing to become vessels instead of sculptors. This truth is hard to accept for the ego, which is always hungry for accomplishment, always craving recognition, always measuring its worth by what it can produce. But the soul knows another rhythm. The soul does not strive, it listens. It does not push, it receives. And it is in this surrender to the deeper waters of the self that creativity begins to stir. The world around us celebrates the visible, the tangible, the measurable. Success is too often equated with how quickly we can bring something to life, how many eyes it can catch, how many hands it can touch. But the most meaningful things, the ones that linger long after the applause dies down, are not made in the glare of attention, but in the quiet shadows where the unconscious has time to breathe. The unconscious is not chaotic, nor is it random. It is ordered in a way the intellect cannot fully grasp. It moves with a logic all its own, ancient and symbolic, full of dreams and paradoxes and forgotten truths. When we touch this place, we do not invent, we remember. There is a passage in the Bible where it is said that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters before creation began. Not the hand of man, not the cleverness of design, but the Spirit, hovering, waiting, brooding over the deep. This is the pattern of all authentic creation. It begins not with action but with presence, not with a blueprint but with openness. We must allow something higher than our conscious will to gestate in the hidden places. And for this to happen, we must first quiet the noise within. When we attempt to create through striving, we are usually reacting to something: pressure, deadlines, expectations, the haunting fear of inadequacy. But reaction is not the same as revelation. Reaction is shallow. Revelation comes from depth, and depth can only be accessed when the striving ceases. In the Bible we are said, "Be still and know that I am God," not be productive, not be impressive, be still. Stillness is the language of the unconscious. It does not speak when it is interrupted. It does not force its way into your awareness. It waits until you are quiet enough to hear the faintest of its whispers. The most profound ideas often arrive not in the moments when we are working feverishly, but when we are walking in silence, when we are resting beneath a tree, when we are doing nothing that seems productive at all. This is because the unconscious needs freedom, not force. It needs space to move in the subtle, winding ways it prefers. It will not emerge under the spotlight of constant scrutiny. It retreats when watched too closely, and it reveals itself in symbols, in dreams, in images that defy explanation but feel unmistakably true. The creative person, then, is not one who seizes ideas, but one who welcomes them, who learns to become soft enough to receive what cannot be taken. In Scripture, the prophets did not chase their visions, they received them. They were often in deserts, in caves, in exile, in places where the outer world offered nothing, and so the inner world had room to speak. They did not force divine words into being, they waited until they were spoken through. And what came through them was not born of their own striving. It was born of alignment, of surrender, of obedience to something larger than themselves. Creativity, in this sense, is an act of humility. It is saying, "Not my will, but thine." It is recognizing that the truest work we ever produce is not authored by us, but through us. This is why the artists, the writers, the poets who endure are often those who live close to mystery. They are not trying to impress. They are not trying to dominate. They are trying to listen. They know that the soul has a language the intellect cannot decode, and they have trained themselves to wait for its cadence, to move with its rhythm, to trust what emerges even when it makes no sense. They have allowed themselves to become empty so that something eternal might pass through. And this emptiness is not the absence of content. It is the presence of possibility. There is a cost to this kind of creativity. It is not glamorous. It does not feed the ego in the way that quick success might. It is slow. It is uncertain. It is often hidden. but it is real, and what is real will last. In the Bible, we are said that man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. The world may celebrate what is flashy, what is marketable, what is timely, but heaven rejoices in what is true, what is born of the Spirit, what is whispered in secret and carried faithfully, even if no one sees. You must come to trust the invisible work happening within you. Even when you feel dry, even when no ideas come, even when the page remains blank and the brush does not move, the unconscious is not idle, it is deepening. Something ancient is rearranging itself below the surface. Something sacred is taking form in the dark, and it will rise when the time is right. Not when you force it, but when you are ready to receive. When your striving finally gives way to stillness, and you stop trying to be creative, and allow yourself to be created. The more you chase inspiration, the more it eludes you. It slips away like a shadow under direct light, like a dream recalled too forcefully and then forgotten entirely. This is one of the most frustrating truths of the creative life, that inspiration does not respond to pursuit, it recoils from it. The more desperately you reach for it, the more it hides. This isn't because inspiration is cruel or unwilling to help you, but because its nature is different from the conscious mind. It does not live in the realm of strategy, timelines, or control. It lives in the unseen, the symbolic, the sacred. To chase it is to impose your own will upon what cannot be commanded. And so, it withdraws, waiting for a gentler invitation. We are trained from an early age to achieve, to conquer, to grasp. The world applauds those who take life by force, who push through exhaustion and create at any cost. But creativity is not a machine, it is a spirit. And spirits are not summoned through pressure, they are drawn through presence. There is a moment in Scripture when the prophet seeks to hear from God. He stands on a mountain, and there comes a mighty wind, then an earthquake, then fire. But God was not in any of those. After all the noise, there came a still small voice. That was where the divine spoke, from the quiet, not from the storm. Inspiration is the same. It does not shout over the noise of your effort. It whispers when you become still enough to listen. Many people confuse activity with productivity, especially in creative pursuits. They believe that if they sit long enough at the desk, if they force themselves to write or paint or invent, something worthwhile will come. Sometimes it does. But often, what is produced through force lacks soul. It may be polished, it may be passable, but it does not sing. It does not carry the mysterious essence that causes people to stop, to feel, to remember. That kind of work comes from another place entirely, a place not accessed by trying harder, but by becoming more open. In the Bible, we are said that unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. You can create with great effort, but if it is not aligned with what is true and alive within you, it will not endure. There is a strange freedom in this realization. If you understand that inspiration does not come from chasing, then you are released from the exhausting burden of always having to be brilliant. You are no longer required to be a machine of output. Instead, you are invited into a different posture, not of striving, but of readiness. You begin to see that your task is not to hunt inspiration down, but to prepare a place for it to come. You learn to build altars in the silence, to sweep the inner room clean, to light the candle and wait. You start to recognize that the most potent creativity arises when you are not watching the clock, when you are not judging your progress, but when you are lost in the timelessness of trust. The more you chase inspiration, the more you forget who you are. You become someone performing creativity instead of embodying it. You reach outward instead of listening inward. You begin to look at others and compare, asking why their ideas come easily and yours seem distant. You begin to doubt your worth, your gift, your calling. But this comparison only pushes inspiration further away. It cannot land on a restless mind. It will not enter a heart filled with envy. It comes when the self is quiet, when there is space, when there is reverence. In the Bible, we are said that God gives grace to the humble, and humility in the creative life means admitting that you do not control the process. You are not the source, you are the soil. The seed does not bloom because the soil tries harder. It blooms because the conditions are right. This is why so many of the most inspired moments come when we are doing something completely unrelated. Washing the dishes, walking in the woods, listening to the rain. These are not acts of productivity, but they create the kind of internal stillness that allows inspiration to slip in unnoticed. You are not chasing it. You are simply living, and in that living, the door cracks open. The idea comes, the image appears. The sentence arrives whole, as if from another realm. It feels effortless not because it is easy, but because you did not force it. This does not mean that discipline is useless. There is value in showing up, in being faithful to the work, even when the spark is not there. But even in this, the posture must change. You are not there to capture inspiration like prey. You are there to make yourself available. You are there to be seen by the mystery, not to seize it. There is a holy waiting required, and this waiting is not passive. It is full of devotion. It is the kind of waiting that a servant offers a master, not begging, not demanding, but attending, watching for the signal, ready to respond, ready to say yes when the time is right. Inspiration often visits those who have stopped obsessing over it. It comes to those who are at peace with not knowing, with not controlling, with not being in charge. It finds the ones who have given up the chase and have begun to dwell instead. Dwell in presence. Dwell in silence. Dwell in trust. In the Bible we are said that the kingdom of God is within you. What you seek is not out there running ahead of you, laughing at your failure to catch it. It is already inside you, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be listened to, waiting to be loved. The paradox is that when you stop chasing inspiration, it begins to follow you. Not because you finally deserve it, not because you earned it, but because you became the kind of person who could carry it. You became soft where you were once rigid, patient where you were once demanding, receptive where you were once forceful, and in this transformation, something opened, something shifted. And what once eluded you now comes without warning, without striving, like the wind that blows where it wishes, and you hear its sound, though you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. Stillness is the womb in which original thought is born. Not the kind of stillness that is merely the absence of noise, but the deeper stillness that settles in the soul when striving ceases and listening begins. It is a sacred kind of quiet, not just silence in the outer world, but silence within. The quieting of fears, of ambitions, of the need to prove or perform. In that silence, something ancient and eternal begins to stir, not because you summoned it, but because you made space for it. Just as no seed can grow in ground that is constantly being trampled, no idea can bloom in a mind that is always rushing, always filling itself with answers before asking the deeper questions. We live in a culture that fears stillness. It is seen as unproductive, as a kind of void that must be filled with sound, motion, achievement. Every pause becomes an opening for distraction. Every moment of rest becomes an invitation to consume more, scroll more, prove more. Yet all true creation begins with emptiness. The earth was formless and void, and then came light. It was the formlessness itself that became the canvas for divine expression. There was no structure, no plan, only presence, and that was enough. In the Bible we are said that in returning and rest you shall be saved, in quietness and trust shall be your strength. This is the soil where originality grows, not in the frantic gathering of ideas, but in the deep waiting that trusts the soul's own timing. The pressure to create often blinds us to the truth that nothing real can be forced. The deepest insights arrive, not as answers to questions shouted into the universe, but as gentle replies to whispers spoken in surrender. The mind can analyze, but it cannot give birth. Only the soul can do that. And the soul does not speak in speed. It speaks in symbols, in impressions, in dreams that hover at the edge of language. It speaks slowly, and only when we are still enough to hear. You cannot rush the voice of the soul. You cannot demand it to speak on command. But you can honor it with your stillness. You can prepare a quiet place within and wait. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of depth. It is not laziness or avoidance. It is intentional, it is alert, it is receptive. Stillness is a form of faith, a radical trust that what needs to come will come. Not because you hunted it down, but because you made yourself available to receive it. In the Bible we are said that the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. There is a power that flows in the absence of force, a wisdom that rises when the ego steps aside. Stillness does not make you less, it makes you whole. The creative act, when born of stillness, becomes sacred. It is no longer about impressing or achieving. It is about revealing something that was already there, something eternal that simply needed space to be seen. You do not invent truth, you uncover it. You do not manufacture beauty, you recognize it, and recognition requires presence. It requires stillness. The truest ideas often feel like memories more than inventions, as if you are recalling something that was written in you long ago. But you can only remember what you have quieted yourself enough to hear. In the Bible we are said that God is not the author of confusion but of peace. Where there is peace, there is room for clarity. Where there is clarity, there is the birth of something original. So many people chase originality through novelty. They believe that being unique means being louder, more extreme, more different than everyone else. But originality is not found in noise. It is found in truth, and truth is often simple, quiet, almost unnoticed. You cannot discover your original voice until you have heard the silence beneath all the borrowed ones. Stillness strips away what is false. It reveals what is real. It helps you see where your thoughts have been shaped by fear, by comparison, by the desire to fit in or stand out. In stillness, those illusions dissolve, and something more authentic emerges. Not just a new idea, but a new way of seeing, a new way of being. There is an intimacy in stillness that few are willing to endure. When all distractions are removed, you are left with yourself, your thoughts, your longings, your wounds, your questions. It is uncomfortable. But it is also holy. For it is in that inner silence that you begin to touch the eternal, the unchanging, the divine. In the Bible we are said that those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Waiting is not wasted time. It is preparatory time. It is the stretching of the soul so that it can hold something larger than itself. The deeper the stillness, the stronger the vessel. When you practice stillness, you begin to see that ideas are not something you create from nothing. They are already present, floating in the atmosphere of the unseen, waiting for a place to land. Your job is to become that place, to become grounded enough, quiet enough, open enough, that something sacred can take root in you. Originality is not a performance. It is a revelation, and revelation cannot be rushed. It arrives in the fullness of time, not the fullness of effort. The most profound works of art, poetry, music, and insight do not arise from ambition alone. They arise from communion. Communion with the deeper self. Communion with the spirit. Communion with the silent places where truth lives, unspoken but undeniable. The world will tempt you to move faster, to create louder, to push harder. But the soul will call you into quiet. It will call you to the wilderness, to the cave, to the still waters where restoration begins. And in that stillness, something eternal begins to stir. Something original begins to form. Not because you forced it, but because you waited for it. Because you trusted that the womb of stillness would open in its time, and from it would come not just an idea, but a living thing, full of breath, full of truth, full of light. When you try to control creativity, you limit it. You shrink it into something manageable, predictable, familiar. But true creativity does not belong to the conscious mind alone. It comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere older than logic, somewhere more vast than reason. It is not meant to be domesticated. It is not something to be fenced in or tamed. And yet, the impulse to control is strong in most of us. We want to be certain of the outcome. We want to measure, to judge, to edit before anything has even been expressed. But creativity is not born in the place of control. It is born in the place of risk, of surrender, of trust. Control is often fear in disguise. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear that what we create will not be good enough, meaningful enough, perfect enough. But fear cannot give birth to something alive. It can only repeat what has already been done. It can only recreate what is safe. And what is safe is rarely transformative. In the Bible, we are said that perfect love casts out fear. Love, not control, is the source of true creation. When you create from love, you are not trying to impress anyone. You are not trying to shield yourself from failure. You are simply responding to what is real inside you, without resistance, without shame. The need to control the outcome often prevents the idea from fully forming. It suffocates it before it can take its first breath. Imagine trying to force a flower to bloom before its time, pulling at the petals with anxious fingers. You would destroy it. Not because the seed was flawed, but because you couldn't wait for it to unfold. Creativity has its own rhythm, its own pace, and it is rarely linear. It loops, it wanders, it hesitates, it changes its mind. When you try to control it, you deny it the space it needs to reveal its true form. There is a deeper intelligence at work when you are creating, something that speaks in images, in sensations, in movements you don't always understand. When you silence that voice with plans and outlines and fixed expectations, you miss the surprise, the grace, the revelation. In the Bible we are said that the wind blows where it wishes, you hear its sound but cannot tell where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with the Spirit, and so it is with creativity. You do not command the wind. You receive it. You align yourself with it. You let it move through you, even when it takes you somewhere unexpected. Control belongs to the ego. The ego wants to predict and manipulate and win. But the soul is not concerned with winning. The soul wants only to be honest, to speak what is true, to give voice to what lies buried beneath the surface. When you create from the soul, you are not asking what others will think. You are not editing yourself to meet someone else's expectation. You are simply offering what you have been given. In the Bible, we are said that we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. You are the vessel, not the source. Your job is not to control the treasure. It is to carry it faithfully, humbly, vulnerably. To create without control is not to abandon craft or discipline. It is not a rejection of skill or structure. It is the refusal to let those things become a prison. It is the understanding that the best art, the most profound ideas, often emerge not in spite of uncertainty, but because of it. Uncertainty makes room for discovery, for grace, for the unexpected beauty that you could never have planned. When you control too tightly, you repeat yourself. You stay within the boundaries of what has worked before. But when you let go, you enter the unknown. And the unknown is where originality lives. There is a passage in Scripture where it is said that God gives wisdom generously to those who ask, without finding fault. But wisdom does not come in formulas. It comes in moments, in flashes, in insights that break through the surface like light through cracked stone. You cannot schedule that kind of wisdom. You can only make yourself available to it. You can only create the conditions in which it might appear. That means loosening your grip. That means making room for mystery. So much of what we call creative block is not a lack of inspiration. It is a refusal to release control. It is the fear of what might emerge if we allow the unconscious to speak freely. What if it's not beautiful? What if it's not profound? What if it reveals something we're not ready to face? But creativity requires courage. Not the courage to be perfect, but the courage to be real. The courage to bring something into the world, even when you do not yet understand it. Even when it is incomplete, raw, unfinished. The courage to say yes to what is moving through you, without trying to reshape it into something safer. There is a sacredness in that kind of risk. In giving up the illusion that you are in charge. In saying to the Spirit, "You lead, I will follow." In the Bible, we are said that those who are led by the Spirit are the children of God. To be led is to release your agenda, to allow yourself to be surprised, to step into the unknown, trusting that you are not stepping alone. To create without control is to remember that you are not creating to be admired, but to be in communion with the truth inside you, with the mystery beyond you, with the people who will encounter your work and find something in it that speaks to their own hidden places. When you release the need to control, you create space for something greater to emerge, something that carries not just your fingerprints, but the fingerprints of the divine. Something that could not have been planned, but was meant to be. Something that reminds you that the most powerful creativity is not the kind you manage, it is the kind you trust. Repetition is not the enemy of creativity, it is its womb. There is a hidden rhythm beneath the surface of all things, and only through repetition do we begin to feel it. To engage in the same action, the same movement, the same ritual, again and again, is not to stagnate, but to deepen. It is not to do less, but to discover more within the same space. Repetition invites the unconscious into the room. At first, the act may feel mechanical, shallow, even dull. But something happens the 50th time you return to the canvas, the page, the prayer. The surface cracks. The mask falls. The deeper layers begin to speak. Not because you chased them, but because you stayed. The soul resists speed. It opens slowly, like a flower that refuses to bloom until the conditions are right. And repetition creates those conditions. It softens the ground. It quiets the distractions. It clears the noise. When you repeat something with intention, you are not just performing a task, you are invoking presence. You are training your mind to listen beneath the obvious. You are giving the deeper self a pattern to inhabit. And the soul loves pattern. It finds safety there. It finds room to express itself without having to shout over novelty. In a world addicted to the new, repetition is seen as failure. To do the same thing twice is to risk being boring. To return to the same place is to seem like you haven't moved. But growth is not always linear. The tree does not grow in a straight line. It coils upward in rings, each year folding into the next, each layer invisible from the outside but vital to its strength. So too with the inner life. It spirals inward, not outward. It revisits what it thought it knew and sees it again with new eyes. And in that returning, something profound is revealed. In the Bible we are said that line must be upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, and there a little. This is the spiritual pattern of growth, not in leaps, but in layers. The greatest truths are rarely discovered in a flash of brilliance. They are unveiled through slow, faithful repetition. To come back to the same scripture, the same meditation, the same silence, not to escape, but to encounter, you begin to realize that the thing you are repeating is not the same every time. You are changing. Your perception is evolving. What once seemed shallow now reveals a hidden depth. What once felt routine now becomes sacred. In that repetition you are being formed. Not just in your craft, but in your character. In the Bible we are said that we are transformed by the renewing of our minds. And the mind is not renewed through novelty, but through sustained attention. There is humility in repetition. It teaches you to lay down your obsession with instant results. It invites you into the process, not just the product. It reminds you that mastery is not about control, but about surrender. About allowing something larger than you to take shape through your hands, your voice, your heart. And that only happens when you show up, again and again, regardless of how you feel. Repetition trains the soul in faithfulness. It says, even when I cannot see the fruit, I will still plant the seed. Even when I do not feel inspired, I will still return. Because I believe that something sacred is taking root beyond what I can measure. Many people give up too soon. Not because they lack talent, but because they lack endurance. They mistake early discomfort for failure. They believe that if something is truly inspired, it will always feel effortless. But this is not how the soul works. The soul is shaped by effort, by rhythm, by the slow chiseling of repetition. In the Bible we are said not to grow weary in doing good, for in due season we shall reap, if we do not give up. The due season comes not through impulse, but through persistence, through the holy labor of repetition. Art, prayer, love. These are not built in moments of genius. They are built in patterns. In the daily returning, in the repeated gesture, in the practiced stillness. And through that repetition, you are not just creating something outside of you. You are being created. Each time you return to the sacred act, it shapes you. It refines you. It reveals what is untrue and strengthens what is real. Over time, repetition becomes revelation. The lines you once traced without meaning begin to form a map. The sounds you once heard without understanding become music. The gestures you once made out of duty become devotion. To repeat something is to believe that there is still more to find. It is to say, I have not exhausted the depth of this. There is still truth hidden here, still beauty waiting to be uncovered. In a world that demands constant stimulation, repetition is rebellion. It is the refusal to believe that worth is measured by novelty. It is the wisdom that says, I do not need to move on to something new to feel alive. I need only to remain where I am, with open eyes and an open heart. In the Bible, we are said to meditate day and night on what is good, and in doing so, we will be like a tree planted by streams of water, yielding fruit in season, whose leaf does not wither. This is the reward of repetition, rootedness, fruitfulness, endurance. When you allow repetition to become a spiritual rhythm, creativity begins to flow more naturally. It is no longer something you chase, but something that meets you in your daily practice. You begin to see that the sacred is not found in flashes of brilliance, but in the steady heartbeat of commitment. The ordinary act, repeated with love, becomes extraordinary. The simple gesture, done faithfully, becomes a channel for grace. And through this, your creativity becomes not just an expression, but a communion, a way of dwelling in the mystery, a way of saying yes to the slow, unfolding work of the soul. Stillness is not the absence of motion, it is the presence of depth. It is the quiet beyond noise, the silence that is not empty but full. When we learn to be still, truly still, we discover that the soul is not waiting for stimulation, but for recognition. There is a river within us that flows gently, but we do not hear it when we are constantly moving, thinking, reacting. Stillness is the posture in which we begin to hear again, to see again, to feel what has long been buried beneath the debris of distraction. In stillness, the soul becomes visible, and in that visibility, creativity begins to emerge not as performance, but as communion. We are taught to chase ideas, to run after inspiration, to stay busy so we do not fall behind. But creativity, like the spirit, moves where it wills. It is not caught by running. It is received by waiting, and waiting requires trust. In Bible we are said that those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. Waiting is not weakness. Stillness is not laziness. It is the sacred discipline of listening, of being fully present to what already is, rather than grasping for what is not yet. Most people are afraid of stillness because it reveals too much. It strips away the layers we wear to survive, the identities we perform to belong, the distractions we use to numb. But those who fear stillness also fear their own depths. Because once you are still, once the surface quiets, the soul begins to speak, and it does not lie. Stillness is the condition in which creativity ceases to be something you manufacture and becomes something you discover. You realize the ideas were already there, the insights already forming, the stories already speaking. They were just drowned out by the noise of your striving. The deeper parts of the soul do not shout, they whisper. And unless you are still, you will never hear them. In Bible we are said that God was not in the wind, or the earthquake, or the fire, but in a still small voice. That voice is not far from you. It is waiting beneath your restless thoughts, beneath your compulsive doing, beneath your need to prove yourself. But to hear it, you must stop. You must be quiet. You must be willing to encounter yourself without filters. There is a reason that the most creative minds have always returned to solitude, to silence, to the wilderness. Because in those spaces, the soul is not performing. It is remembering. Remembering who it is beneath the noise. Remembering what it loves. Remembering what it came to say. And that remembering is the beginning of true creation. Not creation that mimics or impresses or sells, but creation that heals. Creation that reveals. Creation that invites others into their own stillness. The most powerful work does not come from the surface. It comes from the depths. And you only reach the depths by being still. Stillness is not passive. It is an active form of surrender. It is choosing to let go of control, to let the mind unwind, to let the spirit breathe. It is opening the door to mystery, allowing the unknown to enter without needing to define it. In stillness, you come face to face with your longing, your hunger, your ache to connect with something larger than yourself. And that ache is sacred. It is the seed of every true creative act. In Bible we are said that deep calls to deep. It is not the shallow places that awaken creativity. It is the deep, the still, the unmeasured. When your soul meets the silence, something eternal begins to stir. Not a thought, not a plan, but a presence. Most of us fill our days with noise because we are afraid of what we will find in the quiet. But the quiet is not the enemy. It is the home. The place where you return to the truth. The place where the masks fall away and you can finally breathe without pretending. When you create from that place, your work carries a different weight. It does not scream to be seen. It does not demand applause. It speaks softly but clearly. It carries the aroma of the eternal. In stillness, you are not working for approval. You are working from union. Union with the divine, with the inner self, with the thread that runs through all living things. Creativity becomes worship. It becomes prayer without words. It becomes the soul's way of saying, I am here, I am listening, I am ready. We often ask what we should create next, what new idea we should chase, what story we should tell. But stillness reminds us that the answer is already inside us, waiting to be uncovered, not invented. In Bible we are said that the kingdom of God is within you. So is the vision, so is the voice, so is the creative flame. But it will not be found in frenzy. It will not be born in haste. It emerges slowly like dawn. It needs time, it needs space, it needs stillness. When you embrace stillness as part of your creative rhythm, you are no longer driven by urgency. You are guided by clarity. You begin to discern the difference between impulse and inspiration, between reaction and revelation. You see that not everything that comes quickly is worth pursuing, and not everything that takes time is wasted. In fact, the most meaningful things often require long silence before they can be spoken. The most powerful images, the most lasting truths, are not caught by chasing, they are received by resting. In stillness, you learn that your worth is not tied to productivity. Your value is not measured by output. You are already enough. You are already connected. You are already whole. From that place, your creativity flows not from pressure but from peace. You write not to prove but to reveal. You paint not to perform but to witness. You build not to escape but to embody what is true. Stillness teaches you to wait for what is real, to honor the quiet voice, to trust that what comes from rest will carry more life than what comes from rush. And when you return to your work from that place, it bears fruit not just for you, but for others. It becomes a mirror in which they see their own hidden depths. It becomes a door through which they too can step into silence, into beauty, into their own sacred creativity. There comes a point in every seeker's journey where the chase exhausts the spirit. The relentless pursuit of originality, the addiction to outcome, the hunger for applause, these things wear thin over time. And what remains when the surface finally cracks is a simple question. What is trying to speak through me if I would only be quiet enough to listen? This question cannot be answered by intellect alone. It must be carried inward, cradled in the soul's silent chambers, left to mature in the darkness where all real transformations begin. For the deepest creativity is not an achievement, but a revelation. It is not something you invent. It is something you remember. To be truly creative without forcing it, one must descend into the interior life with reverence. There must be a sacred pause, a turning inward, a willingness to touch the quiet places where language hasn't yet formed, but where meaning is already alive. It is here that the soul begins to stir, not with noise or demand, but with a gentle whisper. In Bible we are said that wisdom cries out not in the chaos, but in the gates, in the still and ordered places. This wisdom does not rush. It does not impress. It does not clamor to be seen. It waits to be found by those who are brave enough to slow down, to listen, to honor what is unfolding rather than attempting to control it. We have been taught to grasp at inspiration as though it were a commodity. But creativity is not caught by aggression. It is welcomed through surrender. It moves like the wind, unpredictable, untamed, often arriving in moments when we are least prepared, because it is not looking for performance, it is looking for presence. The soul is not a machine that can be scheduled, forced, or manipulated. It opens when it feels safe, when it is no longer being used as a means to an end, but honored as a living mystery. In this way, creativity becomes less about production and more about communion. It is no longer the act of making something new, but the act of encountering what is eternal. To live in this way requires a transformation of values. You must trade the urgency of success for the patience of depth. You must stop trying to force beauty and begin to make space for it. In Bible we are said that we must be still and know, not strive and conquer. The knowing that is born from stillness is a knowing that can create without effort, speak without noise, build without fear. It is rooted in trust. Trust that the divine has already planted the seeds. Trust that the soul has something to say, even if you do not yet know the words. Trust that your job is not to invent the truth, but to become clear enough to receive it. Stillness does not mean inaction. It means alignment. It means letting your outer work reflect your inner truth. It means resisting the temptation to imitate others, and daring instead to wait for your own voice to rise. It means turning away from the pressure to be brilliant and turning toward the invitation to be honest. Because the world does not need more noise. It needs more presence. It needs more people willing to create from their center, not from their ego. It needs more souls who are willing to walk slowly through the fire of becoming, so that what emerges is not a product, but a prophecy. When you stop forcing creativity, you begin to see that you were never the source of it in the first place. You were always the vessel. In Bible we are said that we hold treasure in earthen vessels, so that the glory may be known as not our own. This is the paradox of true creativity. It is intensely personal, and yet not yours. It comes through you, but it does not belong to you. It is born in your depths, but it is not confined to your image. You are not the maker, you are the midwife. And like any midwife, your task is to be present, to hold space, to protect the process, but never to take ownership of the birth. To be creative without forcing it means to let go of timelines, comparisons, and formulas. It means honoring your unique rhythm, even if it seems slower than the world demands. It means returning to the sacred again and again, not for answers, but for relationship. In Bible we are said to walk by faith, not by sight. Creativity born of faith does not rush toward clarity. It walks slowly through the fog, trusting that each step will reveal the next. It does not demand perfection. It welcomes process. It does not strive to be heard. It waits to be understood. This kind of creativity cannot be taught. It must be lived. It must be suffered. It must be felt in the marrow. Because there will be seasons when nothing comes, when the well feels dry, when the silence stretches longer than you thought you could bear. These are not punishments. They are invitations. They are the gestational seasons when your soul is growing roots in unseen places. They are the winters before the bloom. In Bible we are said that unless a seed falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. The death of your illusions, the death of your forced efforts, the death of your shallow ambitions, these are the preconditions for creative resurrection. Do not fear the silence. Do not resent the stillness. Do not measure your worth by how much you produce. Creativity is not a task. It is a way of being, a way of seeing, a way of loving what is unseen and believing it into form. It is less about doing and more about becoming. It asks you to become the kind of person who can hold beauty without distorting it, who can receive revelation without exploiting it, who can tell the truth without decorating it. This is the path of the soul-centered creator. And it is not an easy path, but it is a holy one. You will know you are walking this path, not because your work is celebrated, but because your inner world is at peace. Not because you have gone viral, but because your spirit is aligned. You will begin to recognize that the best ideas often come not when you are striving for them, but when you are at rest, when you are walking in nature, when you are washing dishes, when you are praying without words. Because the soul speaks in the in-between places. And if you make room for those places, you will never run out of things to say. To be creative without forcing it is to become attuned to the sacred movements of the spirit. It is to live with open hands, ready to receive, but not desperate to possess. It is to work not from anxiety, but from intimacy. In Bible we are said that we are co-laborers with the divine, not competitors, not conquerors, but companions. Creativity, then, becomes a dialogue, a relationship, a dance between your limited form and the limitless breath that animates it. It becomes less about control and more about communion. Your creativity is not a performance. It is a mirror that reflects not only what you think, but who you are becoming. Every poem, every painting, every act of service, every gentle word, it is not just a product, it is a signpost. It reveals where you are on your journey. It reveals what you value. It reveals what you believe about the world, about yourself, about the divine. And when that mirror is clear, when it is polished by stillness, by silence, by surrender, then what others see through you is not your brilliance, but the light beyond it. In this light, your work takes on a deeper purpose. It is no longer about you. It is about what wants to be born through you. It is about healing, awakening, reconciling. It is about bringing the invisible into visibility. It is about creating in a way that makes others feel seen, not just impressed, loved, not just entertained, remembered, not just informed. This is the calling of the soulful creator, to be a lamp, not a spotlight, to be a window, not a wall. So when you sit down to write or paint or sing or serve, pause first, breathe, listen. Ask what is moving within me that longs to be known. What pain, what hope, what question is asking to be shaped into form? And then trust that you don't have to force it. You don't have to manufacture something profound. You need only to be faithful to what arises. In Bible we are said that if we acknowledge the divine in all our ways, our paths will be made straight. Acknowledgement is the beginning of clarity, not force, not noise, just presence. And in that presence all things begin to move again. The stagnant waters stir, the dry bones rattle, the seeds break open. And what once felt blocked now begins to flow. Not because you fought harder, but because you finally surrendered. Because you trusted that what was meant to come through you would come, in its time, in its way, bearing fruit that does not fade. This is how we create without forcing it. By becoming still enough to hear, humble enough to receive, and courageous enough to say yes when the sacred speaks.